So my next topic here is his philosophy, but I'll go into the thing I put off a bit earlier about the head coach. I believe in the same year, and this is T1 head coach, I believe in the same year actually, T1 kicked their coaches. So because they had like a subpar split. I think they were like 4th or 5th maybe. They were playing the 10-man roster, which was kind of weird. They were trying to see who was good. Of course, Gamushi had a few games, but he wasn't really put into Worlds. This was spring split, I believe, by the way. This was more so just the thing for spring split. Of course, T1 did much better come summer split and playoffs. And then, of course, they had one of the best showings. They had the second best showing on the LCK department at Worlds, where they really just went online. But if we're thinking slotting LS into an environment like T1, where specifically Joe Marsh is so big on the healthy balance on the side of competition versus play versus like knowing your limits. I mean, LS would have been the same situation as he was in Cloud9. He's not a head coach. He is an influencer. He is a analyst. He is he could be even like an assistant coach, but he's not a person that's like going to do team therapy. He's not someone who I can't remember. There was someone, a coach, I want to say it was Mark Zimmerman, who said when he was a coach, he would drive across LA to pick someone up from a bar because they were drunk after getting upset from a game. And like when you're thinking about these behaviors that head coaches employ, I mean, it's not a coach in the terms of game, but it's a coach in terms of life coach. And we've really seen that a life coach is essential for a good head coach. And when you're looking at that behavior where you have to drive across town to take care of someone, LS would never do that. And I think for that reason, LS could never be a head coach, even though he would be brilliant as a coach, as a league coach, but he's not a good person coach. So that's why I think even the people that are complaining about him not getting into T1 as a coach, people that were at the time very upset, saying that he was just there was a lot of slander. There was Korean slander that was really, really ugly. People just going off saying that Koreans were the reason because there was even a rumor that a Korean had revealed the information about his grandmother that was like just so not true. There were just so many weird things that came out of this really culty fan base. It was just really weird. And it's like, why are you seeing that? Okay. So moving on to his philosophy, let's see. So I went over about the open-mindedness. Game enthusiasm is something I didn't really touch on quite yet. When you're thinking about who LS admires, he admires especially people with like a lot of enthusiasm and love for the game. We see this in how he talks about Blabber. Blabber was someone he actually kind of looked down upon before working with C9. He thought Blabber, because of course when you think of Blabber, you think he's very aggressive. He's one of the best LCS junglers, but he plays things, I think in past seasons, he was really good for like Olaf. And LS hates Olaf. But when LS was able to talk with Blabber, they were able to come to so many like open-minded like conversations and debates about the game that it enlightened LS. And of course, this is one of the great things about LS is that he's entirely susceptible to change. He will view people as he seems fit, as he thinks people are as intelligent. He's very like meritocratic. It's all about merit. So I think that's like one thing that's really key about the LS philosophy is open-mindedness, innovation, and enthusiasm. Do you love the game? Are you constantly looking at the game in different lights? Is the game something that, are you able to improve at the game? Are you improving actively? These are all things that are really big for LS. And I think when you're taking away what you can get from LS, like the fans should not be all uptight on the concretes of what LS says. It's the abstracts that matter. It's when LS was going off at the very beginning of item change rework, Lilia should go Moonstone because you would usually have AP elsewhere on your team. Lilia does not need to do more damage. Lilia has a lot of base damage in her percent HP true damage, I believe it is. And Moonstone just gave so many ridiculous heals for like non-healing. Like you made You made a AoE like dancing, prancing goat or whatever Lilia is. Like you don't think Enchanter when you think Lilia. You build one item on her, you become Enchanter. Add staff, you become an Enchanter with as much AP as a mage. Like, these are innovations. These are what it means to embody the LS philosophy. Of course, we saw, I think there was one pro player that played Moonstone Lilia before it was popularized. It was just played once. Just nothing happened of it. Of course, we saw a lot of Night Harvesters on Nidalee's, which was like atrocious, not free thinking when you look at damages. And so like that's a big thing about LS philosophy. Fans of LS shouldn't be taking up the concretes. They should take up the abstracts. Moving on. So philosophy. So of course, going back to what he said about like Nemesis and Malice, the things that he said that were like really brutal to them. I think in the world of LS, ends usually justify the means, even if he regrets it afterwards. And what I mean by that is, in any instance of decision making, he will do as what he thinks he can to get whatever end he needs. Anything will be brutally gone after. And I mean, this is basically what he did with Nemesis. We don't know the extent of it, but he probably slandered Nemesis in the hopes that Nemesis would just concede and join him. I mean, it's an awful way of going about it, and it's probably the worst way to like fulfill a long time like work relationship. I mean, imagine if he got bullied into going to Cloud9 with him. Gets bullied into Cloud9, what, he's going to have an awful relationship with LS and be stuck to work with him? Like, when you're thinking about LS as, like, this kind of brutal person that really just only cares about the ends, the means really get soaked up in the middle and they kind of get just destroyed. I mean, there are probably better ways to reach the same end, but when it comes to LS, it's definitely a matter of means justify the ends, and that leads a lot of regretful decisions in his life. And then, of course, the last thing I want to touch up on the LS thing is that LS is very keen about the premise of living in a glass house. That is to say that he is always online and constantly sharing everything that's going on with him. I mean, for the general part, this is kind of true. He streamed some dumb number of hours last year. Of course, that ended up in his burnout, where he just dipped for 2 months, which is completely understandable. But at the same time, it's like, it really makes it hard to understand and to not perceive this glass house as true. But at the same time, we see LS. He's lived in a house with many people for ages. He just recently talked about the last roommate of his just moved out. Now it's just him and Hero. When you're thinking about this, how is it that someone can co-live with people like Shrimp? I think he lived with Shrimp. I think he lived with Onion, Autumn, May, I think was another one. But like, these are people he's historically lived long times with. Max Waldo. But Max Waldo is a bit of an exception to what I'm going to say here, though. But like, when you think of it, where's their interactions on stream? Like, what's going on? You don't know the personal relationships of LS, even though he says he lives in a glass house. So when he says this, it's clearly not true to the extent of which it should be. Like, when you say you live in a glass house, it means everyone knows everything about you. You're just open book. But he's not an open book. He's someone who, like, has, like, one room that's made purely of glass and then a bedroom that's completely cut off from the rest of the world. It's like, you can't just say you live in a glass house. And I think this is another big thing that helps fuel the cult. It fuels the cult attitude of LS because people think they know him. They're like, oh, I know LS. I see him when he streams. And I see him when he talks about people, and he always says nice things, because he generally says nice things. He only like flames like egregious people online, like RJS, and I mean egregious not in the person, but as in what they say. LS usually never does personal attacks. And so like when you're thinking about this, the people that are like really cultish about him, of course they're going to say, oh, if he lives in a glass house and this is what we see, it's great. But I mean, the Malice drama didn't come out from LS. It wasn't on stream. It wasn't like, who was it? It wasn't like when Reggie was yelling in the background of someone streaming back in 20, whatever it was. These are like instances of LS's life that we just don't see. And so it's not really a glass house. And when you think about someone, you cannot take their online persona for who they really are. LS has had, I think, 2 drinking streams that I'm aware of where he like got really, not really inebriated, but he doesn't drink much. So of course he's going to get affected very quickly. And he just changed his personality entirely. He even said it himself. when he drinks that he's no longer LS, he's Nick. And of course he said how he hates being Nick and he only wants to be known as LS. But like the ramifications of saying something like this, when I am drinking, I am Nick. He is sad. He is somber. He is not really. He's depressed, not in like the mental way, but depressed in that he's slower. He's just not on top of things, and that's not the image you get in the glass house picture of him. And so when you have these kind of like rays of sunshine coming out of the bedroom that we can peer into, we know he's not in a glass house. And that just means that there's more nuance to when we talk about LS, when we talk about things around LS. And so it's just, you can't have this cultish attitude. You have to take everything with a grain of salt, and you have to be able to do what LS says, and that is to think for yourself and not just take people's words for whatever the hell they are. Okay, so of course the takeaways, so basically I wrote here, you don't put LS on a pedestal. He may be the head of the church, but he is no god. He's human. There are cons to his pros. You can't take him as this end-all be-all. Of course, goes without saying, respect the good of him, criticize the bad. Is he an awful person to people at times? Yes. Criticize that. He should be better. If you can basically tell people that they can improve, it's never a bad thing to do that. To basically say someone is perfect is to do a disservice to them, because you're basically not letting them grow. I mean, the only way you can grow is through criticism. Criticism is fundamental. That's why LS literally built his platform off criticism. He was only able to become so influential because he criticized, and people grew from it. That's how his relationships came. He came from criticizing to the extent that people began to change and get better. And that's good. You have to think critically, think out of the box, but you can't just cultishly believe in the god LS. Does not exist. Okay, so as I mentioned before, RJS. We're going to go into RJS here. First thing I have on the menu, Memer Bader. RJS, if you don't know, he got, I believe, 6th place on Challengers Queue. I don't know how much money that means he got, but it's impressive. Of course, we know, I believe, Jojo Pyun got 1st place, EG's mid laner, who is, of course, one of the best mid laners in the LCS right now. In terms of mechanics on mages specifically, I'd probably put him at 2nd. It's probably Bjergsen, Jojo Pyun, Fudge Tuku, maybe? Tukui? Not too sure. I'd have to think more about that. But when you're thinking of Jojo Pyun, he's the mid laner, the new mid laner. Fudge, of course, being not a mid laner per se, he's a top laner. As LS puts him, he's a mid laner thinker, but he plays top lane, or he used to. But now, of course, he's mid lane. But he doesn't have the same comfort or practice, of course, as Jojo Pyun has. So that makes Jojo Pyun much more skilled in the upfront way of thinking about it. Of course, he was 1st, and RJS was 6th. So we know RJS is talented. He was on BOG. I don't know what amateur that team that is, but he's talented. He's good at the game. Now, what does that leave to say about his opinions? Well, right now, RJS is being really aggressive with Veigar V2 about Lux Victor matchup. So currently, we have the argument that Lux can't play into Victor, needs Biscuits, needs Scorch or whatever, and then Victor, of course, needs the same. And it's basically RJS's argument. You can't play for late game because early game escalates and there's no change. And when you look at the game from this point of view, of course, you're going to look at it from a what min-max situation can I find myself in. Victor outdoes Lux early because Victor has easier poke, has better trading with auto attacks given the Q and the shield, and Lux in general can be dodged. When you're looking at these factors, of course Lux is going to have a disfavorable matchup. But when you're thinking about this, does that mean Lux then wants to put all of her goodies in the early game? Of course, to RJS, you need to, because then you don't get to late game, which is completely counter to Veigar, because Veigar V2 says, well, that's ridiculous, just play better. And of course, we know from the stream, Veigar V2 played into RJS, and Veigar V2 playing, I believe, Lux on 160 ping into RJS, who, if you're looking at it, I think RJS is in Los Angeles, so that would mean he would be playing on 60-50 ping. So you have 50 ping on Victor versus 160 ping on Lux. RJS is playing Biscuit, Scorch, Victor, and Vigor V2 is playing Scaling Lux. So I'm going to assume Gathering Storm instead of Scorch, and then the Futures Market for the Biscuit replacement. And when you think about this, of course, if it's true that Lux can get out of lane, which we saw when they played, like this was just simply a matter of fact. RJS was not able to bully Vigor V2, and like any kind of skill discrepancy was kind of nullified almost by the fact that he was playing on 160 ping. Like that's hard when you're talking about like dodging skill shots, especially when you're thinking about Victor E. It's like pretty quick. So the fact that he's able to like live and do well means that immediately the Biscuits give you 150 mana, and then the HP doesn't matter the next time you back because you get full HP from Fountain. So the second Victor backs after using a Biscuit, he just has 50 to 150 more mana, whereas Lux has the ability to buy an item 30 seconds faster. Going back to it, Victor with Scorch. Scorch, I believe, is 10 to 30 scaling through game length, extra damage on any attack every 10 seconds. So when you're thinking about what Scorch does, Scorch is really good, I think, in terms of... I think this is what was said by LS2, was that it's good on single target champs. Because when you're single targeting, that Scorch damage isn't bad. 10 is a lot. You're thinking about if you have your average like 60-70% AP ratio, you're effectively getting like 13-14 AP worth if you're just hitting them once every 10 seconds, which I mean is much more than Gathering Storm does until like 20 minutes. So Scorch can even be better than Gathering Storm, like for a very decent period of time. But especially when you're thinking about champs that are more team-based, Scorch hitting one person every 10 seconds is not going to be nearly as effective as that 8, 20, whatever AP that it gives you on 5 champs. And of course, when you're thinking about Lux and Victor, Victor's, I think it's called Maelstrom, his ultimate, does a lot of damage to a lot of people. And of course, Lux's Laser Beam is going to hurt just as well. And it's going to do multiple people. Lux's E is also AoE. These are the things you have to take into mind when you're thinking critically about what these champs do. And if it's true that Lux does not need assistance, then of course you need to go scaling. Because it's just optimal, right? Because the scaling means you do more later, and if you're fine early, that's all you care about. Of course, we go... it comes to the conclusion that RJS is basically saying, no, you're wrong. Which is like where the weird thing comes in. You're thinking, this guy's 6th place in Challengers Queue. He's really good. He's an ex-pro. Is he ex... I'm not sure if he played professional or just academy, but he is ex-pro in any regard. Oh, wait, was he on DeMonte's team like 2 years ago? Oh, I can't remember. May have been backup when we had that one team. I don't remember which team it was that rotated mids a bunch. Was that 100 Thieves? I'm not sure. Don't quote me on any of this. But basically, we know he's good. He has talent, at least mechanical. He may even have great macro talent. I'm not too sure of this. I'm not going to speak on his behalf. But it's possible to have great knowledge of map, great knowledge of when to Baron, etc., and still not know itemization, or runes in this case. And so this really comes to the difference of when we're looking at these differences. Are we going to go one of the other philosophy? You have the hyper aggro early game, the RJS philosophy, or the scaling late game philosophy. And I think, of course, thinking critically, you don't go to one or the other. You think about it and you say, well, hey, what is a team comp? So RJS and Vigor V2 are talking about isolated scenarios. In isolated scenarios, I think it's always best to do scaling because, of course, if you can live the early game, as you say, it's just better late game. But when you're talking about team comps, if you have a timer team comp, something with an Olaf, say you're going something ridiculous like Renekton, Nidalee, I guess like Zed, but we wouldn't see Zed mid lane, but like to something to that effect. I can't think of really... I mean, I guess Syndra, but you wouldn't want a Syndra's Nidalee. It's hard to give like a great example, but say you have something along the lines of Renekton, Nidalee, Syndra, Kalista / Draven / Lucian, say Lucian for example, Lucian, Nautilus, something like that. You have Renekton, Nidalee, Syndra, Lucian, Nautilus. you're on a timer. You have great early game, but you need to get the game done early. This is where Scorch Syndra is probably a lot better than Gathering Storm Syndra, because what matters is, can you get towers? Can you get at least 4 or 5 towers and 3 drakes before 20 minutes? And when you're thinking about this, Scorch is going to be better. It's going to do more damage, and the Gathering Storm is going to not come online. When you're thinking about Renekton Nidalee, does Nidalee care about the 8 AP after she's done her 3rd tower dive? No, she wants that 10 Scorch damage. Of course, I don't think Nidalee goes Scorch, but that's besides the point. It's for the sake of the example. When you're thinking about these scenarios, you want early game pressure. So of course, this is not something you would want to necessarily draft unless you know you're outright better than the opponent, unless you know your opponent's bad at game time transitions, like they don't know how to go from early to mid, like what to do after a laning phase. You can really oppress like people with poor macro by the fact that you're going to shut them down really early, and then they have nothing to really build off on. And so there's a place for it. It's not something that can just be denounced without good reason. It just happens to be, that's not the place you usually want to be in. We've seen just historically, scaling tends to be really strong because pro players are not actually that drastically different from one another in skill level. You cannot 3-time tower dive someone usually, top lane. Like that's not going to realistically happen. And most games we're seeing are going to like 30-some, 40 minutes even. And when you're thinking about realistically, when you think critically, you want scaling in those situations. And so it's just about thinking. You have to think better. Of course, does not really matter to RJS. His whole philosophy is min-max early aggression, and if you're able to have an early lead, you win. Of course, that's not true. It can be true, but it's not a true overall. It's a poor statement to make when you're trying to influence others, but it's just the way RJS is. Of course, we do know he has many redeeming qualities in his actual talent. And this is one thing I put down, is that he legitimately forces people to think. Because what you have is you literally have 2 contesting fields of thought. You have, you pick champs that are strong and they work in a team comp thematically correct. They have better late game as well as decent to good early game. Of course, when we're thinking about scaling, we're not thinking, Kayle. Kayle is not necessarily a scaler because Kayle is just a vacuum champ. When you want scaling, usually you want to find what scales is actually not necessarily just something that has this, it's better later. When you're thinking about scaling, you're thinking of, when I'm looking at this comp, in the context of who has been chosen so far, what can I pick that either disrupts the comp? What can I pick to disrupt the comp? What can I pick to counter the comp? These are the questions you ask when you turn to questions of scaling. When we look at comps that are very melee based, what's good into really big melee comps? This is Aphelios, and this was Aphelios' rise to fame. We saw Aphelios just being willy-nilly against all these triple melee comps, quad melee comps. And it's what are you going to do about it? Aphelios just beats you 1v1 and you're a bruiser. That's not what's supposed to happen necessarily, especially when you get on top of Aphelios, but that's how it's designed. And so you really need to think critically about these ideas of scaling, what it is to scale, what it is to have early aggro, what it is to have prio. These are all questions that need to be answered critically. And so, of course, this is about as much I had pre-planned for episode 1. It was a lot of tangent, a lot of just me talking about whatever the hell, and that's not really an issue. That's kind of what I intended. This is going to be basically the premise for how future conversations will go. Of course, it won't be about LS, RJS, conflicts, all of this stuff. This was just more so giving me something to talk about. It gives you guys a insight on how I think personally, of my own. It shows what I listen to, how in-depth I am with the scene, what I know, and it's generally with what I would say is a good theme for episode 0s is just introductory, piloting, and so I am really excited for the upcoming 5 true episodes. I'm planning currently on doing the first one with Richard Felvo. He is the head coach for our UCLA collegiate team. I have quite a few things already planned for that, and hopefully that'll go all smoothly. But I'm very happy to have concluded the first episode 0. It was a lot of tangents, a lot of mindless talking, but that's good. It's all about league, and that's what we're here for. So thank you for watching. I'm TLG or Justin, and this has been TLG Talks.